Welcome to Lacrosse Recruiting 101, where the biggest names in lacrosse share their inside views and expertise. Now, your host, Luke Cometti.
In this episode of the podcast, I talk with Sergio Salcido, entering his first season as an assistant coach for Rollins College. This is Sergio's first time stepping into the college coaching arena. However, he is quite an accomplished lacrosse player himself. He has played professional lacrosse for 3 years now, most recently with the Redwoods Lacrosse Club in the Premier Lacrosse League. In the inaugural season, Sergio was selected for the league's first ever All-Star game and helped lead the Redwoods to the PLL Championship. Prior to the PLL, he played for the Atlanta Blaze and Florida Launch in the Major Lacrosse League. Before joining the professional ranks, Sergio was a midfielder at Syracuse University. He was a two-time All-American, two-time All-ACC honoree, and ACC Offensive Player of the Year as a senior. He helped the Orange to a pair of ACC Tournament Championships and 4 straight NCAA Tournament berths. In the podcast, we cover a wide variety of topics, including why Sergio took the coaching job at Division II Rollins College, why he sees success in the program's future, and why a student athlete or any student would want to attend the school. Later in the show, we talk about Sergio's struggles when he was a high school player from a non-traditional lacrosse area, trying to get recruited and ultimately make it at the Division I level, and what advice he would give to young players in similar situations. We also dive into how he trains as a player, how he approaches his diet, and what his top 3 exercises for any lacrosse player would be. If I missed something or there's something you'd like to hear on the next podcast, then please email us at questions@lacrosserecruiting101.com or tweet at our Twitter handle @laxrecruit101. Sergio Salcido, Coach Salcido, thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate you being here.
Luke, happy to connect with you, brother. Thanks for having me.
Of course. And a change in your lacrosse, I guess, add one to the belt, now assistant coach at Rollins. Let's start off by telling us why you took that job. I know it's probably pretty convenient for you, but maybe what you saw there. I know you wouldn't hop into a coaching job unless you saw success or for potential for success. So maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Right. So, graduated in 2017 and was just volunteering with the program there. They're local. I live, 5 minutes from the campus. So it is convenient. But, no, you hit the nail on the head. Like you said, I wouldn't have taken the opportunity hadn't I seen a lot of potential, within the program. And after I got to kind of know some of the players and know some of their families and kind of develop a history of a lot of the guys we have on our team as far as where they're from and what their high school experience was, I could see the potential and the work ethic behind the guys and how bad they wanted to be successful. So I figured I'd take a leap into coaching and be as best of a resource to the program. And, we concluded the fall and it's been rolling. So definitely fortunate for the opportunity. And I'm definitely grateful to be working with the kids that we have on the team there.
That's awesome. It sounds like a great opportunity. And you said you're excited to work with those players. What type of players are you excited to work with at Rollins? And maybe what are you hoping, as far as in the future that, as they bring on recruits, what type of players are you hoping to be coaching?
Right. And so, at the Division II level, obviously you get a mix of guys, who are maybe playing because they don't want it to be as much of what you consider to be like a full-time job at the Division I level. But, our guys are bought in. They all have a really good work ethic. They're anxious to learn. And I think the aspect of me being a professional at playing at the highest level, they're not in awe, but I think that they realize the privilege it is to kind of work as colleagues and work together. I'm close enough in age with them where I can relate to a lot of the things as far as what the college life goes as a student athlete. So we've structured a really good program around how we practice and kind of how we train the kids, and they're all bought in. I mean, they come with the right questions. They spend extra time making sure that they're getting better, and they really want to want to do things right and down to the exact minor details. So I'd say top three, they're focused, they're disciplined, and lastly and most importantly, they're very accountable young men. So I guess those are my top three as far as what we would be trying to look for as a recruit.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's an interesting and good dynamic that you are still playing. You are younger, you can relate a little more, but they probably have, almost a respect for you just because you are still doing it and you are doing everything they're doing at practice, the hard workouts, the sprints, whatever it may be. They still know you're doing it and you wouldn't make them do anything you wouldn't do yourself. Correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, and it's a lot of, like you said, practice what you preach. So it holds them accountable, but it honestly really holds me more disciplined within my own focus on my own craft, because if I'm preaching it and I'm talking about the minor details and I'm hammering guys about honing in on those, then when I'm out doing it myself, I've got to do the same, and I've got to live to that standard. So it's really only made me better as a player as well.
Yeah, I think that's so true. When you coach, you see the game in a different light as opposed to being a player, and you think about it differently. And those who have the opportunity to still compete and coach at a high level, I mean, I'm sure it only adds to your game, and it helps every time you step on the field.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Let's say I'm not a lacrosse player or involved with athletics, but I still am looking at Rollins College. You're a relatively new coach there, but you're born and raised in Winter Park, so I'm sure you know a decent amount about the school and a lot about the area. So, what other selling points does Rollins College have as a whole?
I mean, it's going to be one of the most beautiful campuses in the United States.
That's what I've heard.
It's awesome it's an awesome private school. I mean, it's November right now. It's 70 degrees, sunny. There's not a cloud in the sky. And I think, this time of year is why you want to be in this area. It's good weather. Obviously, you receive a very high, prestigious education coming out of a private school like Rollins. And then on top of that, I mean, I think just the community as a whole is really bought in around the school and supports a lot of the school. So everything outside of the campus is extremely safe. It's in an area where everything's a lot newer, and, it's in a very, I guess, mid to high income neighborhood. So you kind of deal with the different culture, and you can network better that way. You can network with people who have retired down here, who own businesses, run businesses, or have a tenure in a certain industry. And you can really kind of pinpoint that network here in Central Florida, which is a growing market. So I think it's a great place to go to school. And obviously, like I said, the weather, it's just a bonus with all of that. So
yeah, can't beat it. We're approaching winter break coming up here in a few weeks. And let's say one of your players comes up to you and says, "Hey, coach, what are the two most important drills I can be doing on my own?" Kind of the quote unquote when no one's watching drills. What would you tell them to do?
I'd say, with our guys specifically, we've got a few things that we always constantly are honing in, working on, making sure that we're repping. And for an offensive guy, the number one would be shooting, but more so shooting mechanics. So I encourage our guys to shoot a little bit with less pace, less aggression, less speed, shoot a little bit smoother, a little bit lighter, maybe 80%. But to really hone in on the fundamentals of the shot, minimizing all the wind up, all the extra noise, as we call it, but really just trying to simplify everything into a process. So, 3-step process for shooting, and then any type of footwork that they can be doing as far as dodging and getting their bodies moving as if they were in a practice is always something I think that adds value, because as long as you're a threat, obviously in lacrosse, then you can be an asset to your team. So those are my two biggest go-tos with the guys over break.
So you say shoot 80%, but work on kind of your form and the less noise. Is that also include accuracy, right? Is that something you want your players to focus on? When you're shooting?
Yeah, absolutely. And, anyone can throw a ball into the middle of the net, but I think, the key with taking it down to 80% is when you're shooting as hard as you can every rep, you might spray a few shots. You're over, maybe one shot's got a little bit more on it than another, and it's just kind of all over the place. But I feel like when you kind of dial it back, especially when practicing, you can focus on the same movements, the same speed, and really start to hone in on the release as far as where you're putting the ball, whether it's in a high corner or a low corner or a hip. But then you can start to develop that consistency. So then when you do get into that pressured game situation where you're running at a full speed, it almost feels like you're now back at 80%, and you've seen it before.
Yeah.
So
slows
that's
it
definitely
down
something I'm trying to apply. Oh yeah.
Nice. All right, switching gears a little here. Let's say there's a high school player who's at a prime recruiting age, but he's not getting quite the looks he was hoping for. Whether it's because he's undersized or from a non-traditional lacrosse area, something along those lines. The reason I mention those two things is because I know they hit pretty close to home for you because you had a similar experience, but you were still able to find yourself at Syracuse and having a lot of success there, and now a lot of success at the professional level. Looking back to when you were in high school and your experience coming out, what type of advice would you give a player in a similar position?
So, it does obviously hit home to me with my career history, but, I'd say the biggest thing I would recommend, and when I look back, I would say what led to my success later in my college career was that, when I was growing up, all we heard about, all the non-hotbeds, all you hear about are these big tournaments and these big recruiting events. And then you've got your in-state summer club team events where you're playing through your high school and you're playing locally. I started to focus when I was younger in high school of getting away from constantly playing in the tournaments and really taking that time to focus on developing my game. And that was more in the sense of going to camps, going to clinics, going to out-of-state events where I could develop, take away some things, learning from quality coaching, because, in the area at the time, there wasn't a lot of quality coaching, and really understand and develop all those mechanics. So then when I got an opportunity to play in front of a college coach, at least I knew my game had something to offer besides being an athlete out of a non-hotbed. So I think kids get caught up in the crosstown rivalries in the summer club circuit playing in the in-state tournaments, but at times you can kind of dial that back and balance it and spend more time and resources and finances going toward developing yourself as an athlete in the weight room with a trainer, or even going to developmental events where you can learn how to really craft your game and take drills home with you and take terminology home with you. So I'd say that'd be my biggest advice for young guys looking to improve. And then as far as getting in front of colleges go, I would go to the schools. I went to the Syracuse University camp in 7th grade, in 8th grade, and then my sophomore year of high school. And it was just their standard overnight camp. Now, obviously, colleges host prospect days now, which were even more beneficial.
Yeah.
But that was a way for me to pick at the coaches, get to know them, get my name to be something that they're aware of, who I am, where I'm from, what my ambition is as far as playing at this level. So then when I showed up at campus as a freshman and I didn't have the options I was hoping for, and I knew I wanted to walk on and give that a try, at least I knew that there was a history behind it. They knew the persistency behind it. They saw me develop over the years from 7th, 8th grade to my sophomore year. They saw how my body developed, how I developed, how my game developed. And it's like a job interview. Anytime you get in front of somebody like that, you want to put your best foot out there. And I think if you take that job interview more than once, you see the same coaches, you want to make sure you're always developing. If I see a coach in a fall tournament, when I see him in the spring, I want him to say, wow, that kid his offhand has significantly gotten better in 6 months. That shows me that they're really working when you're not looking, like we talked about earlier. So, that'd be my biggest, bit of advice I could give away to any youth or high school player aspiring to play at the next level.
Yeah, and you're not the only coach that has said that. Don't overlook the development side. Obviously, there is value in playing in certain events, playing, rival club teams, getting in that atmosphere. But at the end of the day, you still need to be getting better. And a lot of that can come from just training and, just getting coached, whether it's 1v1 or a camp, where it's not necessarily geared towards recruiting. I think it was Galway who said there was a Canadian guy who came out to one event and had 17 offers. So it's like, obviously it wasn't his first time playing lacrosse. He developed as a player and he's able to come out to one event and get all these looks. So, as you said, a balance. And I think that's huge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, and even so in the sense of like kids worry so much about the flash and the social media and being the guy who makes the highlights. But, when I got into coaching after college, I started reading a lot of books, Nick Saban books, just trying to learn. And the best quote and takeaway I use with our guys here, and really I approach my own game with, is the farther you get away from the fundamentals, the higher the risk, the lower the reward. The closer you stay toward being a fundamental player, the lower the risk, the higher the reward. And you go to camps growing up. I mean, I learned the same shooting, the same dodging, the same kind of things. They always, when you roll back, don't hang your stick. You hear that everywhere you go. And that should be a sign saying, look, these are the basic fundamentals, and yet we constantly are coaching them. If you can be the best at these few minor things, facets of the game, then you can be one of the best athletes in the game, be one of the best players, and have really a high reward, low risk type of game behind you, where you're not a liability as far as being consistent.
Yeah, I mean, that's sound advice. What was the hardest adjustment for you going to play lacrosse at Syracuse? A top program in the nation, from Winter Park, Florida, high school ball, which isn't necessarily known for lacrosse, especially at the time. Maybe some things you didn't anticipate that you can make players now in high school aware of as they transition to the collegiate level.
For me, I think it was a lot of, a couple things. One, obviously, leaving Florida and going to Syracuse, everyone around me was good, if not better than me. I mean, majority of the guys when I was a freshman, you were there. I mean, you guys were all better than me. And I didn't have the skill yet, let alone the IQ, but I had the basic athleticism to kind of give myself that opportunity. So once I realized that, that was one part of it. The second part of it was, you look at the recruiting class, there's 14, 15 guys that come in. And I think I set my expectations of, well, you're going to go in there, you're going to prove a point, yada, 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 with the chip on my shoulder. But I set this expectation of like, that comes with starting or getting in the lineup, getting in the depth chart. And I mean, you look at recruiting classes in the Division I level, 15 kids come in, maybe one freshman, if not two, really see the field. So I think I needed to shift away from that expectation of trying to get on the field right away and just say, look, you need to pick a few things you need to get better at as far as my weaknesses go, and you need to turn them into strengths. And I mean, you were there, my freshman year and saw that whole process of things when I got injured. But, coming back from that really just made me realize my IQ needed to get, heightened. My development as far as fundamentals and playing at that speed needed to get heightened. But the blessing is I had so many guys like yourself and all the other upperclassmen around us, that you guys were all resources. I could learn from you. I could watch JoJo's game, watch Kevin, Dylan's game, watch Mulsey's game, and take bits and pieces of our best guys, Scotty, Loy, Hakeem, and take everything I could and learn and watch how you guys could play and maneuver, and then try to go home in the off season and say, look, I've got to get to that level if I want to play. So it was really realizing the standard that was set, and then developing to be able to handle the speed and the IQ of it.
Yeah, and that's pretty mature of you, realizing that, right as you kind of got into Syracuse. Obviously, the upperclassmen had more years of experience playing at Syracuse at that higher level. Right then and there, they may have been ahead of you, hence why you weren't playing. I mean, obviously, you got injured, but that may be the case. And I think a lot of players struggle with that, right? They're the best from their high school, All-American, whatever it is. Then they go to a program, a high level, and they're just a number, especially a freshman, right, who hasn't even had experience at that level. And,
Right.
you want to go in thinking, yeah, I can make an impact, but that impact isn't always going on the field as a freshman and scoring a bunch of goals, right? That impact is being ready when your time's called, but also knowing, being patient, learning from the upperclassmen. And then when it's your turn, and it's your time to shine, you're ready to go. And I think, you're just a great example of that. You didn't have a goal till your junior year, and then all of a sudden you're a second team All-American into a first team All-American. I mean, that's crazy, but that's awesome. And that shows that you were able to process and learn and develop and not get discouraged.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I learned from you guys, and Coach Donahue told me, the first week after I'd gotten hurt, we were in the Carrier Dome for practice. And I remember they had like the blue basketball court pallets were off to the side, and he came right up to me right before practice and said, he picked 3 guys that were midfielders, and he's like, you need to watch these guys all year, and you need to take these bits and pieces from their game. And that was JoJo, yourself, and Scotty Loy. And I just watched you guys all year, and like you said, I just because I was hurt sitting on the bench doesn't mean you can't learn and understand and learn from the mistakes you guys made when you made them. So it was really trying to understand how to set the expectation. And then once I got my opportunity, I wanted to really pay you guys back and everyone back. I wanted to prove that I learned from a really high pedigree and high class of guys who led the way and really paved what the program is like besides being a lacrosse player. It's just such a higher standard, as you know. So, it's something I really take pride in.
Yeah, and it's funny how the tables have turned, because now I watch you in the PLL and try to bring things to my Lake Placid game. But
yeah,
you passed me pretty quickly there, Sergio.
Nah.
So fill in the blank for me here. You cannot be a successful college lacrosse player without blank.
I'd say without, probably my number one would be discipline. And to run on that, if you'd like, I'd say, if you're disciplined, then you're accountable, which means you always take responsibility for your actions and you're not an excuse maker. But really you understand that, like, the reps you get in practice, and I tell our college guys this all the time, but the reps you get in practice are never enough. And if you've got the discipline to have your academic structure fit your schedule well, and you prioritize time with practice and recovery and the lifts and all that, you should have the discipline to find space to get out there and do the additional things to add to your game. Practice is team focused. Your own time is more, introverted and self-focused. So I think you've got to have a balance between being a practice member where you're focusing on the team only and what's best for the team, and then having time, the discipline to structure time for yourself in your own game. So that'd be my number one for all athletes in general.
Yeah, and I tell high school guys that all the time. I say, yeah, this is a team sport and you want to do what's best for the team, but you're helping the team the most by making yourself the best player you can possibly be. And as you said, that starts with discipline. This episode of the podcast is sponsored by the Holiday Lacrosse Camp, which takes place from December 20th through the 22nd in Dallas, Texas. This is the 13th year of the most unique lacrosse camp in the country, where the nation's top NCAA college coaches come to Texas to work with the best players in the state. If you're in the area, I would not want to miss this opportunity to improve your game. Register online now at deuceslax.com. So let's say you have 3 exercises or lifts you can do for the rest of your playing career to keep yourself in good enough physical shape to be competitive on the field. What would they be and why? And let's exclude running. I mean, obviously running is very important, but maybe like, a certain training exercise or a lift that you need to do to stay competitive on the field.
So my 3, my first would be if it's even an exercise, but flexibility, so stretching would be priority one.
Sure is.
Keeping the joints, the muscles, the body really kind of healthy. And then I guess other two, if you wanted me to give three lifts, I guess I'd say box squatting, which targets your hips, your glutes, your hamstring, would be my number one. My number two would probably be anything that has to do with the lower back, as far as reverse hyperextensions, anything to strengthen your lower back and your upper glutes, your posterior chain. And then my last would probably be some type of upper back, target the rear delt muscle group. Those three muscle groups, I think, really power the shot. Leg strength and your hips kind of drive the shot, and your hands kind of just go for a ride until you snap, the release off. But I think those are the three that would keep me in the most, I guess, balance if I had to live off of those.
So no biceps, triceps, chest,
No, the glamour,
come on, man, you're in Florida.
Yeah, right. You'd think the beach muscles would need to be a priority, but I care more about performing than I would looking good.
Of course,
so,
and that's why you are where you are as a player.
But no, that's funny. Yeah, the curls are. You get curls in there too. You should. You can never do too many curls.
Would any of those exercises change if you were in high school or college?
No, I would use those. I mean, I used the same strength coach since I was in ninth grade, and I still use the same strength coach now. And we've used the same method, same system, same progression of it all. It changes a little bit over time as, obviously exercises become innovative, but, I think those would be the three that I would live and die by.
What about your diet? How much of a role does that play in your athletic success, and what does that look like for you?
So my diet has changed significantly since the college days.
I think most people would say that.
The late night calzones are no longer a thing. But I definitely, shifted my focus, and really more so because I was less active. I'm less active now than I was in college. In college, it was really class. And then when I wasn't in class or doing schoolwork, I was benefiting my lacrosse game. Now with, coaching and running events and travel and kind of having my day jam packed, and I was sitting at a desk right out of school working in real estate for 2 years. So just, I think that made me realize, okay, what you eat, what you put in your body, you've got to be wise of, you've got to be conscious of. So I've developed something simple. It's really easy, but I basically rotate around 3 types of protein, which is like organic, chicken, steak, and salmon. And I'll kind of rotate those so I don't get sick of them.
Yeah.
And then I eat a lot of brown rice and sweet potatoes, Brussels sprouts, just try to keep everything balanced as far as making sure I get all the right portions. I eat a big breakfast every day. I force myself to do it even when I'm not really hungry, because I know once you kind of start the day, if things come up and shift or whatever, and you don't get a chance to eat until 12:31, 2 o'clock, then at least you have something and you're not burning weight. And for a guy like me who's 5'7", 170 pounds, 167 pounds, I can't really afford to lose that weight. I kind of have to keep this weight on and build around it just for the summer and in season, I always lose a little bit. So I usually stick to that regimen with things. I rotate those proteins. I always get a good source of healthy carbs, the right kind of vegetables, starch, all that.
Yeah.
I take zinc in the morning, magnesium at night to help me sleep. And I've got a nutrition company, ATP, that makes all of it extremely easy. I mean, I step by step take the same things every single day, before the workouts, after the workouts, before I go to sleep. And you just become a creature of habit and routine. So I don't even really think about doing it. I just do it every day because now it's my third year and it's just a routine at this point.
Yeah, it's the less you have to think about it, the easier it is, right? Because you have a million other things going on during your day, and you have to think about, what protein am I having today? that's just another thought that's taking up time, that's taking up energy, as opposed to, well, it's steak day, so I'm having steak, right? When you can make those
Right.
processes automated per se, then I mean, it's just easier, and it's easier to stay consistent with that healthy diet.
Absolutely.
What does the process of you getting mentally prepared for a big game look like? And maybe how has that evolved over your career? Because you've played in a lot of big games, and I'm sure you've tweaked it here and there. But maybe walk us through what that looks like for you and why it works for you.
So, that's a great question. When I was early on in my college career, I guess my third season at Syracuse, I started to take more runs as a second line mid. I think Randy Stotts had gotten hurt, and I was starting to get put in more pressure situations. So for me, it was really my routine is 100% evolved around just making sure I feel good come the first whistle. Now, if I wake up and I'm that day, maybe I'm feeling a little bit more sluggish or whatever, I'm always hydrating. But mentally, for me, it's, game day is the fun, the opportunity you get to have fun. Game day is the opportunity you get to use to prove all of the work that you're doing outside of it is going to come to life in that moment. So I really don't try to put pressure on myself, set the expectation too high. I never go into a game thinking, okay, you need to have X, Y, Z amount of points. I mean, I don't do that. I think one of the biggest things I learned from Coach Donahue at Syracuse was just be the best at the game. He would always say that to me. He's like, just focus on being the best at every single facet, every single play. You might be dodging, drawing a double team on one and moving the ball to your teammates and making the selfless decision on that. That's being the best at that specific scenario. You might have a loose ball with a teammate behind you and you goose it or whatever, you make a play there. You're now being the best at competing in that scenario. And I took all the bits and pieces of the game, because there's so many, and I just said, look, you need to find ways to mentally prepare for these, and to do that, you need to rep these. You need to work on these things. You need to train yourself. You need to have the creativity to do that and have the willingness to try it. And then for me, it's, a big Navy SEAL thing. I read a lot of their books. And we met with Rourke Denver, who's a Syracuse alum. He was an ex-SEAL. But his biggest thing was, you don't rise to the occasion, you fall back on your training. So as long as your training is, where it needs to be, when you get into those pressured games, those big games, championship games, whatever, playoffs, you're really just falling back on everything you've done as far as your work ethic goes. And the true colors kind of come out there, I think. So that's kind of how I try to have a peace of mind with any scenario with lacrosse, in big moments and all that.
Yeah, and I tell my players this all the time. If you're practicing, you put in all the work, practicing, shooting, wall ball. You get all your stuff done in school. Just as a whole, you're making yourself the best you can be. When you come to the field for a big game or just any game, I mean, it's just going to be a product of all that hard work, and it's going to be easy. And it's it's just another game that you can relax, and you're confident going in there.
Absolutely. Yeah, and you should have fun on those days. I mean, a lot of guys, they work so hard to get the opportunity to play in those big games. And you don't get a lot of, playoff games in college or, NCAA tournament games or ACC. I mean, you don't really get those moments. You play Virginia once a year, and then in the ACCs, you get 8 tries at them in a college career. That's only 8 games. You play a million games in a lifetime, hundreds of games in a lifetime. Let that be the fun moment and just try to open up and get after it. So I'm with you on that.
Can you talk about a time when you have been in somewhat of a rut, or maybe lost a little confidence, or for whatever reason you were unsure of your lacrosse future? Because young players sometimes see guys in the PLL and guys such as yourself and think, the pros, they've always been really good. It's probably been relatively easy, but I'm sure that's not the case. And even more importantly, what you did during those times to keep yourself kind of on the right path that you can ultimately come out the other side with success.
And that's the key to life, I think. And, I'd say the number one word regarding the question is adversity, and everyone faces it in all different kinds of ways. So, I mean, my number one moment was my freshman year at Syracuse. I just had gotten on the team, gotten the locker, gotten the number, all that stuff. And the first day of practice for my ACL. And for me, that wasn't like a defining moment of, wow, like this is it. It just showed me, like, it tested me, and I looked at it in the sense of, okay, you've wanted to play here your whole life since third grade. It was Syracuse or bust. You're here. You finally are now on the team, and this happens. Instead of me sitting there moping, being pissed off, frustrated, which obviously initially those emotions happen, but not for long. I realized, look, man, if you get a chance to prove how bad you want to be here and how bad you want to perform at this school and fulfill what you set out as a dream of yours when you were a kid, and all those expectations and all the all the talk behind it, you get to prove that point in this kind of moment right now by bouncing back from this injury, which is one of the hardest to overcome, and then developing your game and almost picking up like you never had happened. So that would be my first moment of, like, you know what, like, you're not, the hottest thing on the block. You might have been coming out of Florida, but everyone is around you. And now you're hurt and you're behind the year. Number one recruiting class coming in behind you. You need to really, like, if you want this is the time to go get it. And that was just a test, I think, for me, and to really see how serious I was about playing at that level. And then, I guess the second moment was right after school when I got drafted. Same thing. You get to the pros and you come off this, decorated college career, and it's just a faster game with more guys who have the same type of careers in college as you had. And you've got to kind of reevaluate, be humble, get back to the things that you hold so close as your core values go. And again, just do the work and just develop and always be working to innovate your game. So I'm always, I guess, trying to get better and always trying to learn and taking bits and pieces from other people and advice I can get along the way, and really utilizing it and applying it to my life.
Yeah. And I just think of what you said before about learning from those upperclassmen at Syracuse. And then here you graduate as ACC Offensive Player of the Year, first team All-American, and then you go to the pros, and there's a lot of guys with a similar background like that. So what do? You continue to work hard, and you continue probably to learn from those players. And, after a few years now, you're a PLL All-Star. I mean, and that doesn't stop. That's just lacrosse, but I mean, anything in life, right? Even when you think you're good, you need to constantly learn, right? As they say, if you're not going forward, you're going backwards.
Oh yeah. If you're not getting better, you're getting worse. And, my dad has always had a stellar work ethic, and I've learned a lot of the values in that from him. And, it applies to anything you do. If you set a goal, and regardless of how lofty it is, as long as you've got a work ethic and a plan intact, I mean, that's the key to being successful. And then managing, your character's tested when you're in the lows, not when you're in the highs. When everyone's patting you on the back, that's when it's easy. But when people aren't patting you on the back and you're, in a corner on your own, that's when you've got to, be able to look in the mirror and say, yeah, like I can look back and say I did everything I could in that situation. I'm trying to get better. I'm doing, that's all you can control. So
Exactly.
I'm 100% with you on that as well.
Knows that you're an extremely hard worker, especially when it comes to lacrosse and maybe even golf too, because I've seen you crush the ball with your driver, but we won't get into that right now. But you're a very hardworking lacrosse player that has made it and succeeded at the highest level. Like I've mentioned, Syracuse first team All-American, PLL All-Star. Give me one or two things that a young player listening right now who eventually wants to be in your shoes can do as soon as this podcast is over. something that will start them on the right path, whether it's an actual physical thing or something they need to tell themselves or something they need to consistently do to eventually be the next Sergio Salcido?
The first takeaway would be to, I do this every year after my season ends. I sit down, I give myself like 2 or 3 weeks after the last game, even in college. And then I sit down, I grab a piece of paper and I hand write out, and I spend these 3 weeks reflecting on the season, kind of taking in everything that had happened. And it becomes more real then when you can process it all, because it all happens so quickly.
Yeah.
And then I write out, I draw a line down the middle of the piece of paper, and on the left, I write out all the positives. On the right, I write out all of the negatives. I fold the paper in half, and I only focus on developing a plan around the negatives. So anything that my game needs as far as the weakness goes, if there were moments I didn't handle well, if my preparation was off on the road one specific weekend, if my body during the week, if I missed a workout, if I didn't get up to the field, whatever it is, I hone in on and I fold that piece of paper and I focus on all of those weaknesses. I develop a plan around it and I attack them. And then I set a goal, 6 months from now, when I unfold the piece of paper, can I truthfully take what's on the right side as a weakness and now apply it to the left? Can I honestly put it over there? And, you'll feel confident. You'll know when it's true. And that's what I do. And that's kind of how I structure my off season and how I want to approach everything really. So yeah, I mean, that's my number one. And then my favorite book, I was recommended this by a friend of mine. He was employed, was shifting careers into a different industry and was starting up with something that's, a different pay structure, more commission based. Again, outside of lacrosse, but life. And he said, hey, I read the book Think and Grow Rich. And that book is basically a chronicles, just a series of stories talking about setting these lofty goals, but how to be persistent, how to get through the steps and believe and really focus on the process and less on the end game. And I mean, it's, first story as an example, this guy wants to be Benjamin Franklin's business partner. And I know this is extremely outdated, but
still a great book.
Everyone
Napoleon Hill. Yeah, I love that book.
Yeah, Napoleon Hill. Yeah, and everyone looks at this guy like, you're crazy. You're going to go be Ben Franklin's, business partner. Yeah, good luck. You'll be lucky if you work for him. He's like, I don't want to work for him. I want to be his business partner. So he travels up to, up to Philadelphia, and sure enough, throughout time, he's persistent. He's staying the course. He's focusing on the process. He's focusing on these things. He gets in front of him and he says, hey, I'd love for you to come work for me. And he said, no, I'm not here to work for you. I want to be your partner. And later in the story, obviously, he becomes his partner and invents, forget what it was exactly. But just those kind of things and the persistency and that attitude and that mindset and that relentless effort, I think, truly relate to how I try to live my life, how I try to coach kids, how I try to motivate players, parents, kids trying to get recruited. I think it's a great way to start a foundation if you can understand that piece of literature.
Yeah, and I'll take kind of what you just said there a step further, pulling from earlier in the podcast when you said discipline is key. Being able, everyone knows, how you can get better stick skills, hit the wall, how you're going to get better at shooting, shoot 200 balls a day or whatever it is. Kind of how you reflect on the season, you write things down, you look back, 6 months later, how have you gotten better? I mean, now everyone knows that, but who has the discipline to do it consistently? That's the key.
Right.
You're really just a product of your habits, and who can get themselves to be disciplined enough to have those correct habits to ultimately lead to success.
Absolutely. And it's all about really looking in the mirror and being honest. I mean, anyone can talk about these goals and I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to have this, have that. But like you said, if you're not putting that to action, when you look, you look in the mirror, again, you can fool everyone around you and get everyone to think that you're working hard and you're doing this and here are your goals and this is what you want and that image. But it really isn't true unless you apply it, do it, go through the process of it, deal with some of the adversity that comes along with that process. And, you know, when you look in the mirror, I mean, that's the guy you want to say, yeah, like I didn't take a shortcut. I didn't do anything that would have been a negative toward my goal. And I think having that discipline it's very hard. I struggle with it at times. You know, we're all human, but I challenge myself to hold myself to that kind of standard. And you know, obviously, you share those same qualities. So I'm happy that you know we can get that message out there to kids.
Absolutely. Sergio, this has been awesome. You know, thank you so much for coming on, you know, giving us some insight to what makes you successful and some advice to players, coaches, and anyone who listens to this to really how to apply it to make themselves essentially the best person they can be.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me on here, Luke. And I love hearing what you're doing. So I'm happy to talk and be a resource at any time.
Thanks for listening to Lacrosse Recruiting 101. Catch us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Have a question for Luke? Email them to questions@lacrosserecruiting101.com.